Hey viral fam. Ever bought something online that looked a little off, or maybe you've heard about massive companies losing their groundbreaking inventions? Today, we're diving into a hidden world. The complex issue of intellectual property theft and its significant connection to China. This isn't just about knockoff handbags. It's about the future of innovation and the global economy. Buckle up. You may not like what you're about to hear, but it's important. Think of intellectual property, or IP, as the valuable ideas and creations of individuals and companies. Patents protect inventions, trademarks safeguard brand identity, copyrights protect creative works, and trade secrets are confidential information that gives a business a competitive edge. These aren't just fancy legal terms. They're the fuel that drives innovation and economic growth. Without protection, why would anyone risk investing time and money into creating something new? So, why has intellectual property theft become such a prominent issue in the context of China? The reasons are multifaceted. Economic development. Over the past few decades, China has experienced unprecedented economic growth. A key part of this rapid industrialization has involved acquiring and adapting foreign technologies. Think of it as a shortcut to development, aiming to bridge the technological gap with more established economies. The desire to catch up. For a nation striving to become a global leader in science and technology, the temptation to accelerate progress by leveraging existing innovations can be strong. This isn't to excuse the practice, but understanding the underlying ambition is crucial. State-sponsored espionage. Numerous credible reports and investigations suggest varying degrees of state involvement in intellectual property theft, particularly in areas deemed strategically important. This can range from tacit encouragement to more direct cyber espionage and industrial espionage efforts. Market advantages. Let's be blunt, stealing IP can give domestic companies a massive, unfair advantage. They can produce cheaper goods without the R&D costs, undercut foreign competitors, and rapidly gain market share both domestically and internationally. Forced technology transfer. This is a hotly debated area. Some argue that foreign companies, as a condition of accessing the vast Chinese market, have been pressured to share their technology with local partners. While direct theft might not always be the case, the power dynamics and the resulting transfer of knowledge raise serious concerns for many international businesses. The methods employed in intellectual property theft are diverse and constantly evolving. Cyber espionage. This is the modern battlefield. Sophisticated hacking groups, sometimes linked to state actors, target sensitive data, including trade secrets, research findings, and design specifications, directly from company networks. Physical theft or industrial espionage. The classic spy movie scenario isn't entirely fiction. Individuals may be recruited to infiltrate companies and steal physical documents, blueprints, or even product samples. Insider threats, employees being bribed or coerced, are also a significant concern. Counterfeiting and piracy. This is perhaps the most visible form of IP theft, impacting everything from luxury goods and pharmaceuticals to software and entertainment. The scale of counterfeit production in China has been enormous, flooding global markets with fake products. Exploitation of legal loopholes. Perception matters. While China has IP laws on the books, which we'll discuss shortly, many foreign companies perceive the enforcement mechanisms as weak, inconsistent, or favoring domestic entities. This perceived lack of effective legal recourse can make it easier for IP theft to occur. Pinpointing an exact starting date for IP theft is tricky and can be misleading. As China began its rapid economic ascent and opened its doors to foreign investment, the opportunities, and perhaps the incentives for acquiring foreign technology through various means, grew. This wasn't necessarily a sudden switch, but rather an evolving dynamic alongside China's changing global role. It's more accurate to say that concerns about IP theft from China have become increasingly prominent and vocal as its economy and technological capabilities have advanced. Attributing it solely to one leader oversimplifies a complex historical process. It's crucial to understand that China does have laws in place to protect intellectual property. Over the years, these laws have been revised and strengthened, at least on paper. China has patent laws, trademark laws, copyright laws, and regulations against unfair competition. They have established specialized IP courts and administrative bodies tasked with enforcement. However, the effectiveness of these laws and their enforcement is where significant concerns and criticisms from foreign businesses often lie. Issues such as inconsistent application, local protectionism, and the scale of the problem continue to be major challenges. China plays by a rule of law that goes, rules for tea, not for me. Unfair, yes. but it's allowed to exist. At least until the 2025 US elections. The impact of intellectual property theft is far-reaching. It's not just about big corporations losing profits. It stifles innovation as companies become hesitant to invest in R&D if their work is likely to be copied. It leads to job losses in countries where the original products are developed and manufactured. And it can even pose safety risks when counterfeit goods like pharmaceuticals or auto parts enter the market. But nothing compares to the abuse of children in low-quality, high-profit manufacturing. Beyond the headlines about trade and technology, there's a more profound and heartbreaking consequence of certain economic pressures: child labor. We're turning our attention to this critical human rights issue, specifically within the context of China, and exploring its devastating impact on young lives. Child labor isn't just about kids having chores. The International Labor Organization defines it as work that is mentally, physically, socially, or morally dangerous and harmful to children. And/or interferes with their schooling by depriving them of the opportunity to attend and participate fully. It robs children of their childhood, their education, and their future. Why does child labor persist in China and other parts of the world? It's a complex issue rooted in a confluence of factors. Poverty and economic inequality. This is often the primary driver. When families struggle to survive, the economic necessity of a child's contribution, however small, can become a desperate reality. Children may be forced to work to help their families afford basic needs like food and shelter. Rural-urban migration. The massive migration of families from rural areas to cities in search of work can create vulnerable situations. Migrant families may face precarious living conditions, limited access to social services, and pressure to find any form of employment, including for their children. Weak enforcement of labor laws. While China has laws prohibiting child labor, as we'll discuss, reports from international organizations and human rights groups suggest that enforcement can be inconsistent, particularly in certain sectors or regions closed off to outside countries. Monitoring can be challenging or impossible, and penalties may not always be effectively applied. Cultural factors. It's important to avoid generalizations, but in some deeply impoverished rural communities, there might be cultural norms where children are expected to contribute to family livelihoods at a young age. However, this should be presented as a complex socio-economic issue rather than a justification for exploitation. Demand from certain industries. Some industries, particularly those with low profit margins or informal operations, may be more likely to exploit child labor to reduce costs. Child labor is not confined to one type of work. Reports suggest its presence in various sectors within China, although the scale and nature can vary significantly. These may include manufacturing. Children have been found working in small, unregulated workshops producing goods like textiles, toys, and electronics. Agriculture. In some rural areas, children may be involved in labor-intensive tasks such as harvesting crops or caring for livestock, oftentimes with little to no understanding of the dangers that exist. Brick factories and mining. These are known to be particularly hazardous forms of child labor, and reports, though potentially less frequent now due to increased scrutiny, have surfaced in the past. Many of these reports involve the death and dismemberment of children as young as 4 years old. Informal sector. Children may also be found working in street vending, domestic service, or other informal jobs, often hidden from official oversight. It's crucial to remember that these children are often the most vulnerable, lacking the protection of labor laws and exposed to dangerous conditions and exploitation. China's labor laws explicitly prohibit the employment of children under the age of 16. There are also regulations in place to protect the rights and well-being of young workers who are legally allowed to work under specific conditions, e.g., vocational training with restrictions. The government has stated its commitment to combating child labor and has ratified international conventions. However, the challenge, as with intellectual property rights, often lies in the effective implementation and enforcement of these laws across a vast and diverse country. Child labor is not a problem unique to China or to the present day. It has been a global issue throughout history, often linked to poverty and rapid industrialization. As China's economy has grown and its social safety nets have, in some areas, improved, the nature and prevalence of child labor have likely shifted. However, despite progress in some areas, it remains a persistent concern in certain regions and sectors, particularly where poverty is entrenched and enforcement is weak. The consequences of child labor are profound and long-lasting. These children are denied their right to education, limiting their future opportunities and perpetuating cycles of poverty. They face significant risks to their physical and mental health due to hazardous working conditions, long hours and lack of proper nutrition and rest. They are robbed of their childhood, the chance to play, learn and grow in a safe and nurturing environment. The emotional and psychological scars can last a lifetime. Child labor is a grave violation of human rights, and it demands our attention. By understanding the root causes and the devastating impact on young lives, we can work towards solutions. Support organizations dedicated to protecting children and advocate for stronger enforcement of labor laws. The issue of intellectual property theft from China has not gone unnoticed. The United States has employed a range of strategies to combat these practices, with varying degrees of success and ongoing debate. Today we'll examine these efforts, including the significant actions taken during the Trump administration. The U.S. has pursued legal and trade avenues to address intellectual property theft. This includes lawsuits and WTO complaints. The U.S. has filed lawsuits against Chinese companies accused of IP theft and has brought complaints to the World Trade Organization, WTO, regarding China's trade practices, tariffs and trade war. Trump administration. President Trump's administration initiated a trade war with China, imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. A key justification for these tariffs was the alleged widespread theft of U.S. intellectual property. The administration pursued Section 301 investigations into China's trade practices, which led to the imposition of these tariffs. The Phase 1 trade deal with China included commitments from China to strengthen intellectual property protection. Import restrictions. The U.S. has placed restrictions on the import of certain goods from China, particularly those suspected of being produced using stolen technology or forced labor. Recognizing the growing threat of cyber espionage, the U.S. has taken steps to bolster its cybersecurity defenses. Cybersecurity measures. The U.S. has invested in cybersecurity infrastructure to protect government agencies and private sector companies from cyber attacks originating from China. The Department of Justice has pursued criminal charges against individuals and entities involved in cyber espionage. National security concerns. The Trump administration emphasized the national security implications of China's technology acquisition, particularly in sensitive areas like advanced technology and military applications. Actions were taken to restrict the entry of certain Chinese graduate students and researchers deemed to pose a risk of intellectual property theft. The China Initiative was launched by the Department of Justice to prioritize the prosecution of cases involving Chinese economic espionage and trade secret theft. The U.S. has also sought to address the issue through diplomatic channels. Diplomatic pressure. The U.S. has raised the issue of intellectual property theft in bilateral meetings with Chinese officials and in international forums. International cooperation. The U.S. has worked with its allies to coordinate efforts to pressure China to strengthen its intellectual property protections. The U.S. has also sought to build international consensus on the need to address this issue. The effectiveness of these U.S. strategies is a subject of ongoing debate. Effectiveness. Some argue that the Trump administration's tariffs and trade actions have put pressure on China to address intellectual property theft. Others point to the increased awareness and focus on the issue as a positive outcome of U.S. efforts. Challenges. The sheer scale of the problem and the complexities of global trade make it difficult to fully eliminate intellectual property theft. Balancing economic interests with national security concerns is a delicate balancing act. The long-term effects of the trade war started by the Trump administration are still being analyzed. Enforcing intellectual property rights within China's legal system remains a challenge. The debate continues regarding if the tariffs did more harm than good to the American economy. It's important to acknowledge that there are varying perspectives on how best to address this issue. Some advocate for a more confrontational approach, while others emphasize the importance of diplomacy and cooperation. The debate involves discussions about economic strategy, national security, and international relations. The issue of intellectual property theft is a complex and evolving challenge. By understanding the various strategies employed by the U.S. and the ongoing debates, we can better engage in informed discussions about this critical issue. We've explored the what, the why, and the how of intellectual property theft from China, as well as the United States' efforts to push back. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think is the most effective way for the U.S. and the international community to address these practices? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. Let's have a respectful and productive discussion. Looking at the historical record, particularly throughout the 20th and into the 21st century, China's track record on issues of human rights and openness has faced significant international scrutiny and criticism. However, history is not static. The future remains unwritten, and perhaps, with continued global engagement and pressure, a different path will emerge.